You may have played poker, but playing poker in Texas is a different animal. This is the Texas Poker Podcast with Tyler and Clint.
Hello, this is the Texas Poker Podcast. I'm Tyler. This is Clint.
What's up, y'all?
And we are here with episode 8. So, how are you running this week, Clint?
Oh, it was a pretty interesting week. It was up and down. I ended up like $90. I mean, like, it was real flat, even week, and I was like, ugh. But, I mean, I can't, I'm never going to complain about any type of profit. I had one session, I just got off that upswing, and I was kind of starting to go down a little bit. So, again, I have this night where I have the entire night to myself. I'm going to go and play some poker. So, I get on this new table and get into a big high-low hand where I just have all the draws. It bricks out. I miss. And nothing really interesting, just bad luck. And then I found it really weird because they're like, there's two tables. One is kind of the main table, and they need someone to take the seat, and nobody wants to go over there. And that table, probably the average stack is probably $700 or $800. It's probably getting like $700-800. The average stack on my table, like $200 to $300 at a 1-3 table at most. So I was like, ugh, y'all need somebody to go. Nobody's wanting to go. I'm getting killed in the seat. Let me go over there and see how it goes. I get over there and immediately dealt ace queen of diamonds. And I'm like, okay, this is going to be a great seat change right here. So I end up going with ace queen. Let me check these notes here. Ace queen, I end up making it 20 to go. I get 4 callers to a great flop of queen jack 3. So I bet $60, which is just it's going to be quite a bit over half pot. So I get 1 caller from it. It's a 6 on the turn, no heart. I bet 100. What do you think of this bet size? I was kind of wondering about this.
So, you bet 20 pre-flop, got 4 callers, so that was 5 ways to the flop. You bet 60 on the flop. You had no backdoor diamonds, or there was no diamonds on the board that you remember?
No diamonds on the board.
Okay, but it was queen jack 3, you said?
Yeah.
And then you bet 60 and get 1 caller?
Right.
And then what was the turn one more time?
A 6. An offsuit 6.
Was there any flush draws available?
Yes.
And then I like the $100 bet. That's pretty
Okay.
good. Because, I mean, I would assume right now you're ahead. I don't know what happens in the hand, but I would assume you're ahead. And I definitely like you charging.
Lesser queens, flush draws,
exactly.
Stuff like that.
Yeah, that sounds good. And, it seems like a perfectly fine bet. So
keep that in mind for what comes next, okay?
Okay.
Keep that in mind. The river's a king. It goes check, check. I just feel like I'm kind of out of value here. I mean, if it's a flush draw, they're not calling. I guess I'm losing some value from, like, lesser queens. But not a lot of kings can show up here.
Mm-hmm.
But he shows king 10 for an open-ended straight draw that then just hit the king.
I was just about to say, and you're charging that open-end straight draw. I was going to say maybe 9-10, but...
Yeah. So... Could I have bet more on the turn and gotten them off of it? Yeah, but I mean, I think that's kind of results oriented because in the long run, you want that call.
I was about to say you want that call all day, and I mean, I think it was a good check through on the river to lose the minimum.
Yeah, it didn't feel like the minimum at that moment, but yeah, it was pretty much the minimum. I get off this table and get on this table, immediately get ace queen of diamonds and run into this hand, and I'm like, this is not going to be my night. Guess what? Spoiler alert. Wasn't my night. So the last hand of that night, I end up... So this guy buys in directly to my left. He buys in for like the top. He's like over like $1,000. And this dude is 3-betting just almost every, like, probably 1 out of every 4 or 5 hands. I was like, okay, just wait. We're going to do business, man. So he is just, like, these college kids, I play with a lot of college kids, and you can tell they study the game. But you remember when, like, you were a beginner and you were kind of studying, and everything you study, you, like, go overboard with it?
Right.
Like, a lot of these college kids, they're like, they hear 3-bet more, and then they lose their minds just 3-betting all the time. So, because they hear 3-bet more, but they don't really have the perspective, and, it's great. I mean, I like that anybody's learning, but I end up with, so I have ace-3 of clubs. I raise it to 15. Of course, 3-bet monkey. I love the monkey emoticon on there. Makes it 50. I'm like, any ace is probably good here. I gonna go ahead and make a call with a suited ace. So it comes just a wonderful flop for me. Queen Jack 3 with 2 clubs. Now, I mean, here's the thing: is he probably could have a queen, he could probably have a jack, but with a 3, any ace makes 2 pairs, the 3 makes trips, and then obviously I have the nut flush draw. I check it, thinking he's probably going to bet on almost any flop. He makes it 40. What do you do? Oh, and I am about 250 behind after the 3-bet call.
Ooh, so after the 3-bet call, you're 250 behind. So if you raise it, you're going to have to make it something like 120. I wouldn't mind a raise here.
Oh, I jammed it.
Yeah, okay. I was like, I'm trying to think of either raise small for the jam on the turn. But I guess with someone like that, I mean, that's definitely fine as well. I was debating between the jam or making it like 120, 125 to then jam on any turn. But yeah, you're right. Because, I mean, you still have 2 cards to come if you jam on the flop, which is probably better.
Yeah, well, I mean, my thinking was I want to put if he has nothing, he's going to fold. And, I mean, I'm going to put a lot of pressure on a lot of hands. Like, if it's like Queen 10 or Jack 10 or something like that, something where he's technically ahead of me, then I'm going to put a ton of pressure on them. And really, I think I'm above 50-50, even if he calls.
What kind of hands was he 3-betting with prior that you saw?
Nothing that was too bad. I saw him do it with King Queen, King Jack. They weren't hands that were horrible hands, but they definitely were far from premium hands.
Okay, well, on that note, I like the jam even more then.
Yeah.
With, considering that as well. So I think definitely like the jam there. And I'm sure he's going to call, because if you're 3-betting that, the chance of him folding that hand with that player type seems very small.
Oh, yeah, when I jammed, I was like, oh, I'm going to put the pressure on this. His chips flew in the middle so damn fast. I was like, I have never seen a snap call. I was like, he must have hit a set of queens and jacks. He called with King Queen offsuit.
Ooh, that's kind of light for the snap jam.
Yeah, we go ahead and agree to run it twice, and I brick everything. No ace, no 3, no club. Man, they're like, "Do you want to rebuy?" I'm like, "No, not at all. I am so sad right now."
Not only do I not want to rebuy, I need to check that deck to see if there's any clubs in there.
Yeah, I was like, "Oh my god." Because, I mean, it was the guy I was kind of hoping to get into the hand with, and then I get it in the perfect spot, and then, yeah, not only that, I couldn't even chop the pot when I had, God, I can't even count all the outs in there. So that was that session. And then I played one other time where I was up a decent amount. I was up like 700. But we were doing some Robin Hood stuff that day before. I got like 2 hours of sleep, had to wake up at market open, and I was so tired I didn't even know where I was. There's no interesting hands. Just hit everything. Rivered things. I mean, I was a dirty dog on that one. So, and then this is what gets me on the break even. Last night I went ahead and played, and there was one kind of interesting hand. I have 5-6 of clubs. I raise at 15 from kind of late position. I end up with 2 callers. No, it was 3 callers. Flop ace 9-5, 2 hearts, 1 club.
Mm-hmm.
It checks around to me, and there's one person to act after me. I think about betting here. This seems like a pretty good C-bet spot, but there's 3 people on the hand, and a lot of people will be like, this is perfect for a C-bet. It hits your range. Thing is where I play, nobody's 3-betting any ace, unless it's a ace-king, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of people will check it to me, being the pre-flop better. I go ahead and just check it. I'm like, well, there's 1 club out there, any 5, any 6. I have some equity. I feel like this is just a check spot.
I agree. Will you tell me the flop one more time in your hand?
5-6 of clubs is what I have, and the flop is ace 9-5, 2 hearts, and 1 club.
I don't mind the check there because sometimes with an ace you are going to check on an ace high board. If you have like the ace queen, ace king.
Yeah, or even like a 9 or something like that. So I just choose to kind of take my equity and see a turn. The turn is a 2 of hearts. It checks to me again, and it does bring in a flush. But I'm like, well, a lot of people might bet the flush draw hoping to get their fold equity. I go ahead and make a small bet of 25, thinking this is kind of a good card if nobody has a flush for my 5.
I kind of like a small stab here, and then a bigger stab on the river if they just call, and then you don't see any aggression on the river, just depending on the river card.
I agree. So I bet 25 into about 60, a little under half pot, and I do get 2 that call. So now I'm kind of done with this hand until the river's a 5, giving me trips. So it checks to me. I'm like, there's a flush out there. Nobody's acted like they had a flush. So I am a little nervous with 2 calls, but I'm like, trips right here is I just have to go for value. I bet 50, 1 guy calls, and he shows Jack.
Oh, nice. Okay.
So it's he was a older guy. He's like, you rivered me. I'm like, I sure did.
Yeah, right. The river plays.
Yeah, the river counts just as much, maybe more. So I quit. It's one of those kind of annoying deals where you make squeaked out 100, but I only played for 3 hours. That's over 30 an hour or whatever. That's actually a little bit more than what I make on my hourly. So I think people tend to not give as much credit to these small sessions add up after a while.
Absolutely, because remember I went on that run where I had like 10 winning sessions, but none of them were gigantic, but they were all 1 buy-in win, almost a full buy-in win, 2 $300 wins, and those really added up quick to then hit that new bankroll high after a big win after the 10 winning sessions.
Yeah, I think when you look at your biggest sessions and you kind of compare everything to that on the wins.
Yeah.
But yeah, those small wins or really add up into the equation. And a lot of times, like, I was like, oh, that was kind of a grindy session. But I mean, if I'd have known I was going to go there and make 30 an hour, I would have done that 100% of the time. So yeah, I think you have to remember not to push things too hard and to sometimes take these small wins. And now I was real happy. Our last hand was a high-low hand, 5 card. You know how I hate raising these PLO hands because it just seems like everything can happen. I get pocket aces, both suited, with the ace deuce. Now, you don't play high-low as much as I do. That is like the hand. Okay. I mean, there's just nothing. Ace deuce is like the nuts basically there, and then you have the pocket aces, and they're both suited. And so I go ahead and raise it to 25. I get calls pretty much all the way around because nobody folds anything in PLO ever. And then I get kind of a horrible flop, kind of a decent one. It's a 10 10 queen 9.
Mm-hmm.
Which is horrible in the fact that it makes it to where I can never get a low. Because there's 3 cards out there already, and I need 3 cards to hit a low, and those are all above 9. But I have the nut flush draw.
All right.
So, and I have ace jack for the nut straight draw.
Okay.
I bet into this. I'm like, I have the nut flush draw. Maybe, nobody really has much here. So I bet trying to take this down. And I have pocket aces, which comes into play. I get re-raised pot for about $200. I'm looking at my stack. I'm like, this is the last hand we are playing. And, I'm grinding out what is a kind of a tiny profit. And I'm like, oh, God, I don't want to get into a gigantic. It folds around to me, and the guy says, I know him well. He's like, you're going to have to get lucky. He's like, I got it. I'm like, but I'm counting all my outs. I've got 9 outs for the nut flush. I've got another 3 outs for the nut straight. I mean, that's running right around 50-50. So I end up being like, I can't fold this. We end up pushing all in, and we run it twice and chop. But you want to talk about would have been a sad end of a session. I would have cried, but that was kind of that session. So
nice. I mean, still always good to be profitable.
Yeah.
Me, not as profitable this week, but that'll happen.
Poker's not always going to be profitable every single week.
But I did find, so both of us study poker, and one of the coaches on one of the websites, which we'll actually get into later, was saying about an interesting spot whenever the flop comes out double paired board, how it's actually a really under bluff spot that you can take advantage of.
I like this idea a lot. So, yeah, now, I'm assuming he means, if it's not too multi-way, right?
I'm sure. It seems like all the poker training sites are heads up or so.
Yeah, especially if it's a double paired board and it's 8s through, if it's kind of lower, where when they raise, they just never have that, because when you call, you can have it a lot more than they ever can.
Right. So I actually have a hand that was, because when I first heard this, I was like, ooh, I don't like this. Seems like a good way to burn money. And then after kind of thinking about it, I was like, well, maybe I should try it. I was like, it does seem like you kind of put them in a spot where if they don't have that paired card, they almost have to fold. A lot of times, if you really barrel, double barrel, triple barrel into them, you put a ton of pressure on much better holdings.
Yeah, I very much like that idea. Because, I mean, when you have these overpairs and these big hands, a lot of them are looking for bluffs, kind of semi-bluffs with the flush draws and maybe even an open-ended straight draw. But here, you're really you're turning they have a really good hand in just a bluff catcher.
Right, so here's actually one of the hands, because I actually did it about 3 times in this one session, just getting folds all the time, just constantly. No one could do anything. And I was even showing the bluff after I would do it, just every time, and everyone would still fold.
It really puts people on a spot. I definitely kind of like that.
But, so here was the one hand where, they were doing the button straddle, and I was in the big blind with Queen 10 suited. So I called the 6, and then someone bumped it up to 30, and I'm the only caller. So we're heads up to the flop. The flop comes 6-6 jack. I check, he bets 35. And I was like, it would really be interesting if I check raise him here on this board. Because for the $30 pre-flop, he doesn't have many 6s in his raise. But me out of the big blind, I could have called The extra, yeah.
Oh yeah, 5-6 suited. In 6-7 suited. I mean, you could have like a suited ace. Yeah, you have definitely a lot of calls. Some calls here.
So I check raised him up to where was it? I check raised him up to 150, and he calls.
Well, now you're a little scared.
I was a little scared. And then the turn brought a 9, so the board was 6-6 Jack 9. And I was like, well, we're going to get all the information we need right now. I'm going to take one final stab at it and then check the river if he calls. So then I bet 300 on the turn, and he folds. And then I showed the bluff, and he's just so mad. So mad.
I like that move though on those double paired boards. Like I love it too when your head, like if you're not as multi-way, I obviously love it more. Like I always accuse like some of the training sites, like they'll say stuff, but a lot of it will not work in a multi-way pot. Like if it's going 4 or 5 to the flop. But if you're like if there's one other caller or maybe another one, that's the less multi-way. I like it a whole lot more, but love that move.
Right. I mean, it worked great for me that whole session, and then my session ended in dramatic fashion where, like we talked about last week, relative strength hand versus overall strength hand strength, and I ended up calling in a hand where I definitely shouldn't have. So.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely happens. Ooh, is that queen hand?
Yeah, where I flopped trips and he flopped a boat. So.
Yeah, that was. Run it back for the listeners, like on that hand, because it was kind of an interesting spot, I thought.
Here, let me pull up the notes on it. Let me look real quick. So it was against a player who I just doubled up through previously. Let's see if I can't find the notes for you. Tried to block the notes out.
Yeah, you try to block these things from your memory. I hope to never think of this again until it's on a podcast with tons of people listening and. That I can recount it.
And then hopefully the people at the table get to hear it.
Well, they saw it firsthand, so yeah. I'm sure one of those people really wants to relive it. But yeah, it was well, you had like a decent queen. You had like queen jack.
I had queen jack. Yeah, here we go. So I just found it. So I had queen jack, and the flop came queen 8 with a flush draw. I was so annoyed I didn't even write down the notes, but I remember the gist. I bet the flop, he called. The turn brought an offsuit 4, so the board was queen 8 4 with 2 hearts. I bet pretty big, and then he raised all in for probably about like 2.5 times my bet. And I ended up calling, and he had pocket 8s.
Yeah, Again, it's back to our like relative versus absolute strength. Is even the trip queens look so strong here, but once he re-raises you for 2.5 times your bet, there's very little. I mean, an overplayed queen 10 is about it. I mean, because you could say like, well, maybe a flush draw, but most people are not going to play a flush draw this way. If they're gonna take that aggressive action, it's going to be on the flop usually.
Right, and then, everything's easier in hindsight. So, hindsight, I was thinking, even the hand I was going to fold, but, man, that one, I was like, well, because I did just snap call when he did the same thing with an overpair at pocket kings, and he was representing the same thing. I snap called him and almost felted him. I just about, he covered me by a little bit over.
That definitely comes into play. I mean, if you know he's capable of making a bluff there, you definitely have to at least put that in the possibilities. But, yeah. I mean, if you flop trips to a boat, though, you're going to lose a lot of money. It's just a matter of how much.
Right, and like I was telling you, I like to do the full double up. I'd hate for them to miss any value.
Yeah, you definitely want to, give them all the value for there. You don't want them to be disappointed with just a halfway good hand.
Right. So, yeah, apparently that's what I was doing this week. So that wasn't great. But I was, making the moves with the double paired boards, experimenting with that, experimenting with bluffing with a smaller size bet. trying to make it look like value, and people were folding for that too. So, I mean, just got to do a lot of stuff this week, just ended up not being profitable because of that call.
Yeah, that's kind of the way it goes. I mean, at some point the cards have to run in your favor a little bit, and if you're flopping really good to somebody else's super great, that's not good for you.
Right. So.
But yeah, that's but yeah, it's hoping to get some poker into this, but not going to be a heavy poker week for me this coming up.
Right, yeah, that we were talking about that. Same thing for me. It's probably not going to be that great of a poker week, but then we were talking about different things that we can do, or that you do whenever you're not going to have a good poker week, or not a good poker week, but you can't play much poker that week. What kind of things do you do just to kind of keep sharp or study or?
So obviously we like the vlogs a lot. Everybody's heard us mention those quite a bit. I love those because it's education and fun. It's not super dry. So, and it kind of gives you the enjoyment of kind of being in the poker table. Sometimes, I swear to God, when it's a grindy session and I'm getting no hands, sometimes I think I might rather be watching a vlog. Yeah. But the vlogs are really big. I am a subscriber to Crush Live Poker, where they have the podcast and the videos that kind of go over the sessions. Like those, the live streams. I don't go into live streams a ton, but I do watch those and do enjoy those here and there. So, and then I'll read a lot of poker books too. So I kind of fill my time there. I mean, obviously not all at the same time because that's a ton of time, but sporadically, just how I'm feeling.
Right, because I was telling you, a lot of times I'll do pokercoaching.com. That's the website that I use. I just love their quizzes that they let you do. Their hand quizzes where you get to decide what you would do on every street. Those seem to have been super helpful for me.
Yeah, I think those are really cool. Apparently, Crush Life Poker has none of that. But apparently they are bringing some quizzes on there, which I think would be really cool. I definitely would like to see them kind of put that into focus. But I like Crush Live Poker because it's really the whole focus is on the live poker scene. So, and the videos are just like different ways, mistakes people make and how you can capitalize on it. And I won't lie, like the podcast, as much as I drive, I don't have a ton of time. Even more than the videos, like a podcast where I can drive and kind of use that time that would just be zoned out and do absolutely nothing to study poker. Ooh, God, that's a savior for me.
Well, but one of the big differences that you and I were talking about, because I think poker coaching works a little bit better for me because I like being at the computer doing the quizzes, but you like listening. But one of the big differences is poker coaching has literally 0 PLO on there.
Oh, that's true. I guess because Crush Live Poker is more on the live cash games, and PLO is kind of a big cash game. They even have some high-low. Like, I mean, they have a lot more. They have mostly Hold'em and quite a bit of PLO, but I've found even a little bit of high-low on there too. So that really has helped me with those games because the less the game, the less information you can really find on it. Like, there's a ton of great Hold'em books, but PLO is a lot harder to find, like, good books on it. So their information on there has been super helpful, like getting my game a little bit better on that.
Right, because, well, and as you know, poker coaching is also very tournament based. A big majority of their website is, and I really don't do many tournaments. But the actual, like, their cash game section is still gigantic. It's not as big as the tournament, but there's a ton of value there with all the quizzes. They have hundreds and hundreds of quizzes for cash game, and then another hundreds and hundreds of tournaments. But you can sort it to just do cash games. And then you also they have little different cash game sections. So you can really get and I have the premium, so you have access to everything. So you can get the Cash Game Masterclass, which I highly, highly recommend if you haven't checked it out. Definitely worth it.
Yeah, I think both are really good. It really depends on how you like to learn. If you like the videos of the cash games and the podcast, you're much better off with Crush Live Poker, and it's a little more cash game based. But some people want a more tournament. If you want kind of a little bit of everything, like the tournaments and the cash games, I think Jonathan Little's poker coaching is really good. But I mean, me and you say it all the time. The big thing is that you're studying, because really most all this material is really good, and you're gonna get better if you do any of it. It's just actually putting in some time to actually study.
Right, because I ended up subscribing to Run It Once just to see what it's like, and I just thought I got more out of poker coaching just to how I learn, just like from their videos versus the other ones. I liked poker coaching more than Run It Once. Did you end up looking at any of it with me or not really?
I looked at a little bit with you. I didn't find it bad, but I found it very kind of disorganized.
Right, it was really hard to kind of figure out what you were like, because I remember we looked at it just see their PLO and their hold'em, and I remember it was kind of hard to even find a beginning point on the PLO.
Yeah, it's like yours like has the classes that kind of build into each other, like the Cash Game Master class. Crush Live has like the videos and the podcast, but they also have like the course where they take like all the best videos and all that, and they kind of put it in a line by line deal so you can do it in order. And I like that. I need a little bit more organization. I don't think Run It Once was bad, but it was bad for me in the way I learned.
Right, that was kind of my thing too, and just kind of the video layout. It was okay. Like you said, a lot of these websites and different coaching, they all kind of say the same thing, just different ways.
Right.
And they're all good in different ways, just depending on how you learn.
Yeah, it's oh man, there's I want to give a shout out to this, like a book I read. It's not gotten a ton of traction, but it's been a great learning tool for me. Was The Course by Ed Miller. You know, I preach this book a lot. And the big difference that I like about it that you don't get other places is it goes by your limits. Like it goes like these strategies work at 1-3. And then at 2-5, you need to graduate to these strategies, and then it works. And then he's like, when you go to 5-10, you need to do this. Because some of these courses, I've noticed, they'll give this like, hey, this works and all of this, but you have to play slightly differently at different levels. A bluff that might be a great bluff at 2-5 or 5-5, where people are good, or at least good enough to make some decent folds, might not be a profitable bluff at 1-3. And that was one of the few places I've seen that kind of addressed like such a sizable gap in play difference on different levels.
The big difference I've always noticed between like when you switch game limits is people's 3-betting range.
Oh yeah, the 3-betting range is way different. Yeah, way different. So like, I mean, there's a lot of things in my game because I am the 3-better in my game, and I could not get away with a lot of the stuff, like at some of the more aggressive tables, like you play at and used it on a different, on a regular basis.
Right, that, and then also players squeezing, like making squeeze plays. Almost none of it at 1-3. I mean, you'll see it occasionally, but then whenever you play like 5-5, if it goes like bet, call, that next player is just sitting there just ready to just 3-bet and just, take that dead money from you.
Yeah, I definitely like that. I can't wait to kind of go up in limits because I enjoy the competition and the strategy and figuring out, ways to go against it. Although I did that, with my ace-3 of clubs, and we see how well that went. So maybe my strategy's not the best.
So I guess on a different note, other than different strategies, have you ever gone to the poker room? Because I remember one time in Colorado, whenever we played in Colorado, that spread limit, I think they just changed it, but we went to that, and then they had the different progressive bonuses, but they restarted in the morning. The board got wiped clear. Do you remember that?
Oh, yeah, I definitely remember that, because we had gone to Colorado, and it's a great trip for you and a horrible one for me. I was getting murdered, but then we went over there and saw they had like a ton of one of the most I've ever seen, just on different like straight flush promotions and all of that, and each one hit. Like if it was 5-7 suited, then it was gone. But they had just reset it, so all of them were there.
Right. So we had played late that night, and you were still asleep, and I went to go play because they said the game would start at 10, because that's when it restarts, 10 in the morning or whatever. So I showed up, and I remember one time I was playing. Not one time. I was playing in that on that table, and I had like Jack 9 suited, right? And I was watching, and I remember I ended up folding or whatever. And then the very next hand, I got like Jack 6 offsuit, but I was still so tired in my head. I was like in the big blind and called. I only looked at my cards once, and I ended up flopping a straight with the Jack 9.
Oh, so you were on the impression that you were still playing Jack 9, flopping a straight with it, when in reality you had Jack 6.
Exactly.
Okay. Sad that I picked up on that real quick. Makes me think that maybe this wasn't the only time it's ever happened.
That's the only time it's happened like this.
Oh, okay.
So I remember I ended up like raising, and we ended up getting all the money in on the river, and I would turn over the card. I said straight, and turn over the card and like showed it. And I was like, oh dang, yeah, straight. And then they looked like, what? Like, you don't have a straight. Like, you have a Jack and a 6. And I was like, oh, I had a straight last hand.
Tyler's like, trust me, it's a straight from last hand, so we're good. Yeah. I guess these people just like, they must have thought you were the biggest donkey at this point in the world. That would be great for your image if you're going to be a long session.
Well, some of the people were there that I played with the day before when I was killing it. But you want to talk about you get 0 chips when you have a straight from last hand, by the way. And then you look like a stoned fish, and then no one's folding to you ever the rest of the session.
Tyler's like, my bluffing days at this table are definitely over.
Yeah, because that was before I was even tracking or anything. That was actually right whenever I had like a pretty good. That whole trip was really profitable for me. Kind of built the bank, or started the bankroll to make playing for profit a thing. But that hand, I still remember that, just saying straight, then be like straight, and then the dealer just saying, what? Just, what are you talking about?
That kind of brings it, that's a pretty cool story, but that also brings it, like, the differences, how different poker can be from place to place. Because you remember, like, we're in Texas, where if you raise, everybody's calling everything. Nobody's letting anything go. And we go there, and we're raising, and we're tight players in Texas. And we're raising, and these people are starting to get pissed off at us. Because, I mean, we're raising, 15 and a 1-3, which seems very normal. And, I mean, they're like, you can't have aces every time. And I'm like, I never said I did. I mean, is that the raising range here? So, yeah, it really highlighted how different poker is, just geographically.
Well, I also think there it was spread limit before.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of think that made a lot of players play smaller pots, because when a lot of times on that trip, whenever we got into big pots and you could only bet 100, made things really tough.
That's true. I mean, you're only going to get... I mean, one is... Weirdly enough, you were actually getting a lot of bluffs through that trip, I remember, which was super shocking to me, because it seems like you could bluff less in a spread limit game, because you just can't put that much pressure on a stack. They're going to get better odds to call. But I remember you were actually getting a lot of bluffs through. But I guess yeah, you're right. Since it was spread limit, it just seemed like it was a much tighter table in general.
Yeah, it's so weird how in Texas it's just so call happy.
Yeah, it's so weird how you go to different places. Like, yeah, from Texas. Well, you hear all the vloggers talk about it, how like nothing is quite like Texas right now. But you go to Vegas or anywhere else, it's you have to definitely tone it down, because it's just a different game.
Right, absolutely. But I guess on that note, that concludes episode 8 of the Texas Poker Podcast. We'll see you guys next week. Throw a like, throw a subscribe. Bye.
That was the Texas Poker Podcast. Go ahead and rack up, add time, and we'll see you next week.